Hello, and welcome to video number 14, Contracting Out Demand Response Service of the online course for managing operational and capital costs at rural and small urban transit systems. This video's contents are from Module C of the full guidebook on managing system costs, and this video is the first video in the outsourcing route. This video may be helpful for those who outsource or are considering outsourcing their demand response service. If you directly operate your service and don't have interest in outsourcing, maybe go back and check out the 3 videos in the demand response track, including videos 11, 12, and 13. In one sentence, Module C provides you with strategies for managing demand response costs. Module C contains 4 chapters, and this video's contents are from Chapter 11, Contracting Out Demand Response Service. Okay, let's get started. Chapter 11 contains 2 topics, options for outsourcing and procuring demand response transit service. By the end of this video, you should be able to describe different options for outsourcing DRT service, including the pros and the cons, list key considerations when outsourcing DRT service, and finally, explain strategies and procedures for contractor management and oversight. Let's start with the options for outsourcing. There are many different ways to outsource DRT service. A turnkey contract with overflow providers, a turnkey contract using agency assets, operations contracts with the transit agency or third party performing the call and control center functions, operations contracts that include some call and control center functions, or even brokerages and call and control center contracts. There are a lot of different options, and we really don't have time to go through them during this video. They are described in more detail, Chapter 11 of the guidebook. But just the one key difference to point out here is the difference between turnkey and not. In a turnkey contract, the contractor is providing all of the DRT service. That means they're providing the call and control center functions, scheduling, dispatching, reservations, etc., and are providing operations and maintenance. And in many cases, they're also providing the vehicles. That's what a true turnkey would look like. In the third option here, turnkey contract with agency assets, the transit agency is perhaps providing the vehicles and maybe the maintenance and storage facility for those vehicles, while the contractor is doing everything else. Again, there's many different options, and really finding the one that suits you depends on a lot of factors. When you're procuring DRT service, it's important to define in the request for proposals 4 key elements. The first is a detailed description of the service, as well as providing historical service data and whatever contractual responsibilities the contractor might have. Second, provide the contract term and the schedule for implementation. It's important for the contractor to know how long they would be providing the service and how fast you expect them to initiate the service and get it up to 100% capacity. Third, you must describe how the contractor is paid. This will be discussed in more detail later. And fourth, defining service standards that are tied to the balance of service and cost efficiency and service quality. Those standards should be matched with performance-based incentives, penalties, and liquidated damages. Let's look at these each in more detail. First, a detailed description of the service to be provided, historical service data, and the contractual responsibilities. It's important that this information is put into an RFP because it gives proposers an accurate picture of what the responsibilities are going to be and helps them to understand the size of the service. The more comprehensive the description of the service is and the more historical service data you can provide, the less risk a proposer will face when they're bidding on your RFP. Generally speaking, contractors build in a risk factor to their rates to compensate for the unknown. So the more they know, the less risk, and therefore the more accurate and lower their proposed rates. The second element, the contract term and schedule. It's important to be clear about the contract term. How long they're going to provide service, and then are there renewal options, etc. There are really 3 different phases to a contract that's important to be defined in an RFP and then ultimately in the contract upon award. Those phases include implementation, service delivery, and then the transition to a new contractor at the termination of performance. Generally speaking, an implementation period should be no less than 6 months. Contractors need time to get ready, to hire the staff, not only operators, but also mechanics and call center staff, set up eligibility processes, fine-tune scheduling software, etc. So that 6 months implementation period is very important for a successful startup. We suggest you look at Chapter 11 in the guidebook, and that has a little bit more information about each of these elements. The third element is how the contractor is paid. There are many different payment structures for DRT service. The two most prominent payment structures for a dedicated DRT service are rates per revenue vehicle hour or rates per passenger trip. Now, there are variations on that. For instance, a common variation is to use the rates per hour or rates per trip to cover the contractor's variable costs, and then also include a monthly flat rate to cover the contractor's fixed costs. In this way, a contractor is assured a certain minimum of revenue to cover its fixed costs, regardless of whether service demand goes up or down. This kind of payment structure reduces the risk on the contractor. So the type of payment type you put in your RFP can have a profound impact on the proposed rate, as well as how the contractor behaves. Because up to 70% of demand response service cost is tied to driver wages and fringe benefits, which is a function of hours. So it's important that the contractor have a mechanism to get its costs and, of course, make some profit on the variable side as well as on the fixed side. And the last element are those service standards and performance incentives. Generally speaking, service productivity is a metric to measure the efficiency of DRT service. Productivity usually is something like passengers per hour or passengers per mile, with passengers per hour really being the most common metric. Alternatives to this metric include the percent of shared rides or even cost per passenger trip. In the RFP, a transit agency should clearly state how its efficiency metrics are going to be measured and reported. Avoid simply stating a measure, giving it a name, and expecting the contractor to figure out exactly how you would expect that measure to be calculated. Further, the transit agency should clearly state the standard that the contractor needs to achieve when it's delivering service. For instance, a minimum passengers per hour or a minimum on-time performance. This standard should be accompanied by incentives and/or penalties tied to that standard. An incentive would be the contractor getting a bonus if it meets or exceeds the standard, and a penalty would be a financial penalty or a reduction in what the contractor can bill if it fails to meet the standard. It's, of course, important to ensure that whatever standards you have and whatever incentives and penalties you have in your contract provide a way to balance cost efficiency and productivity metrics and on-time performance standards. You don't want the contractor to solely focus on cost efficiency at the expense of on-time performance or vice versa. Okay, here are the key takeaways from this video. First, a comprehensive RFP for a DRT contractor can help reduce risks, not only for the contractor, but also for the transit agency. So the more robust and clear an RFP is about the responsibilities of a DRT contractor, the more likely you'll get proposals that meet your needs and are also less costly because the risk on the contractor is reduced. It's important to recognize that when you are procuring DRT services, there must be a transition period. These transition activities have additional costs and take additional time. Also, consider a longer contract term to reduce the cost of the contract. This happens because the contractor has a longer period of time over which to amortize any fixed costs or startup costs, and also reduce the risk for the contractor, allowing them to lower what their actual rate is. The contract payment structures can significantly impact cost proposals, and it's important to match what payment structure is being asked in the RFP with what services the contractor is providing. A typical approach includes having some sort of fixed cost rate as well as a per hour or per trip rate so the contractor can recoup its variable costs. And last, it's important to include incentives and/or penalties in your contract, particularly that balance cost efficiency and on-time performance, so that the contractor is motivated to try to maintain both to the highest degree possible. Additional information, resources, and references are provided in Chapter 11 of the guidebook. We encourage you to check them out and to watch the other videos of this online course. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, send them to the email address provided in the video description. Also, links to the full guidebook and toolkit are in the video description, which is where you can also find a link to a short online evaluation form for this specific video. Please fill out that form if this is the first time you've watched this video, because we use that data to help improve this course. If you want to continue the outsourcing route of the online course, consider watching video number 16 on contracting out fixed and flexible route service. Or if you want to see a more detailed discussion of outsourcing demand response call and control center functions, perhaps check out video number 11 on managing call and control center labor costs.